Thank you for turning to page 121. Welcome back to page 121. Today I'm going to take a look at one of the odder modules that was published for AD&D. This is module EX1 Dungeonland by Gary Gygax. This was actually an extension of Gygax's Castle Greyhawk campaign, and one of the few offerings we had from Castle Greyhawk while Gygax was still at TSR. This is an unusual module. It is meant to be a break from dungeon crawling and life or death horrible monsters, yet it's a module that has dungeon crawling, life or death decision, and horrible monsters. There is some whimsy in this module. Gygax was trying to emulate what Lewis Carroll accomplished in the novels, but there's also danger in these modules. This is actually a 9th to 12th level, and this would have been before specialization for fighters came into being a thing. So this is actually a pretty lethal module if you run it exactly as written under those circumstances. I'm going to dive into the module a little bit now, go into some of the background on it, and show you what it contains. First thing I want to show you is the gatefold inside cover of the module. There's the back cover and the front. And these are the overall maps for the wilds of Dungeonland and the woods of tree and giant fungi. This was an interesting module in that you enter Dungeonland, which is really a demi-plane, by falling down a large hole. Not necessarily a rabbit hole, just some type of hole. Gygax doesn't go into specifics on that. One rumor I read online said it was a giant barrel people crawled into, and then they fell, floated gently to a stop, and found themselves in this wonderful demi-plane. The module was published in 1983, and as I said, it was part of Castle Greyhawk, but it was on its own demi-plane, so we don't actually see anything of Castle Greyhawk in this module. The next thing about this is you're supposed to surprise your players with this. It even says here, without warning, you enter a wondrous place where danger hides within a lighthearted journey through Dungeonland. That's the little teaser in the front here. Again, 9th to 12th level. And there's lots of magic that doesn't work in this demi-plane. Animal summoning, cacodemon, call lightning, call woodland beings, trade of Sister, conjure animals, conjure any type of elemental, control weather, creeping doom, dimension door, fly, gate, levitate, monster summoning, any level, pass plant, pass wall, plant control, plant door, teleport, transport via plants, wind walk, x-ray vision, and weather summoning. Oddly enough, plane travel works just fine here. In fact, one of the inhabitants routinely uses ethereal shift as they go through. So you have the first encounter is the grow or shrink. If you drink the potion, you do one. If you eat the bread, you do the other. And there's some magic items that only work when they're small. And then we get to the tiny garden. This is really where the meat of the module begins. There's a statue in the fountain. It looks like an old mage. It actually is an old mage. He's put himself under a statue spell to surprise the player characters. This guy is Charldos, or Carldos, Charldos, the Archmage. Carldos kind of walks to the beat of his own drum. He's an unusual kind of guy who has a different outlook on life. He can be forgetful sometimes, and that has great impact through the rest of the module. We find out that the Cheshire Cat, which is actually a Smilodon, as in the Cheshire Cat's smile, I'm sure that was an intentional pun by Gygax, is a creation of Charldos's half-baked magic, where he didn't quite finish casting a spell on the Smilodon. The Cheshire Cat can talk. He can also turn body parts invisible a little at a time, and then ethereal shift to leave the area. All these are powers that are found by the Cheshire Cat in the novel. The Mad Hatter is also featured in here. Actually, before I get to the Mad Hatter, I want to go to the huge blue mushroom. There's a caterpillar sitting on top of the huge blue mushroom. This, however, is a Behir. His name is Virnig, Virnig. Virbigs are one of my favorite, Behirs are one of my favorite monsters. I enjoy them as an encounter for this level group. They're 12 hit dice. This guy has 73 hit points. But this guy also has a hookah, and the hookah allows him to blow smoke rings, and the smoke rings all have different powers. I'm going to zoom in close for the different results for the powers. So the first one is a good one. You get some worth 2,000, 8,000 gold piece gem. Everything else acts as a stinking cloud, rope of entanglement, shocking grasp, a giant snake, or a fog cloud. So only one benefit and 5 detriments. That's also typical of an early D&D module, whether Gygax wrote it or anyone else. And there's the Smilodon cat, the Cheshire cat, who can talk and is intelligent. That's an interesting encounter. I actually have used that before in my campaign. Hang on, didn't have one of my key lights on. I've used that before in my campaign, and he's actually kind of fun. It's a fun encounter. Coming over to the wilds of Dungeonland, you get to a house that shrinks and crushes the player characters, and you encounter for the first time the Mad Hatter. The Mad Hatter is a monk. He's 8th level and has different monk's powers. This is a monk from Player's Handbook, not from Oriental Adventures. The Mad Hatter is mad, as per the story. He has a hat of holding, and as he reaches under this hat of holding, he can pull out different hats and toss them at you. They have different powers. Hat of occupation makes you think you're another character class. Hat of imprisonment just turns to a giant cage. Hat of disguise is actually a useful magic item. We're familiar from Earth Arcana. It's actually premiered here. The Hat of Fools. You start dancing under Otto's Irresistible Dance. The Executioner's Hood, which is actually a monster in this. And it's the first time we see the Executioner's Hood. And it's interesting. Hat of Command allows you to kind of take charge. But all the hats vanish except the Hat of Disguise, which you get to keep. But only one Hat of Disguise can happen. So it becomes a player character magic item. Next we go to the March Hare. And also the March Hare has some mental issues because he's mad as a March Hare. He is actually a monk also who Charldos, in the earlier part of the module, Charldos the Archmaid, started to polymorph for reasons and never bothered to unpolymorph this guy. So it's a giant rabbit wearing clothing, and he fights like a monk. So this is actually a fun encounter. It's not one I've ever run, but it's one I think I may be running sometime. It's pretty interesting. The Dormouse here is a were-rat, which is just fun as can be. You're getting the idea, I'm sure, by now. One of the more interesting encounters in the module is the giant bull-headed turtle sitting on a ledge. This is actually a dragon turtle. Again, Charldos didn't quite polymorph him. He started to polymorph him and then kind of lost interest halfway through and ended up with this kind of hybrid monster. You get down to the palace with a prince, the Jack of Corlin, who is actually a thief, 12th level, who is actually pretty strong. +3 sword, +3 dagger, and quadruple damage on a backstab. They're just fun encounters. You have to do this in a special way, though. It has to be very tongue-in-cheek, kind of whimsical, but also dangerous. So I can see where this module would be fun. I have to admit, I've never actually run this module. I've run elements of it, like the Cheshire Cat and the Behir, who is also the caterpillar on the blue mushroom. I've run those as part of my Feywild game, and I took the inspiration from these. But this module, again, is intended to be a change of pace for the players. You're not supposed to be so deadly serious in this. You're supposed to have some whimsy and some fun. And in the afterword here, Gary Gygax also talks about all the various people who've played Ernie Gygax, Rob Kuntz, Terry Kuntz, Don Kay, etc. And also, oddly enough, Dr. Joyce Brothers is supposed to have played it at a convention at some point. Dr. Joyce Brothers, for those of you who don't know, was a pop psychologist turned celebrity and showed up in a lot of shows, up to and including being a murder victim in an old Ellery Queen episode from the series of the mid-70s. If you don't know who she was, she's interesting reading. You might want to look her up. The other thing that I did like about this module were the two new monsters, which is the Executioner's Hood there, and then the Hangman Tree, which is actually one of the big final bosses, if you will, final battles of the game. We both see both monsters for the first time here. Very interesting monsters. I've used both in my campaign. And then we see a couple of magic items here, two of which, or there are only two, but both of these show up in Unearthed Arcana 2 years later. They're the Hat of Disguise, which I've already discussed, and a Deck of Illusions, which lets you draw a card, and that's the illusion that appears before you. So again, a different kind of module. It's definitely not for your hardcore, serious as can be AD&D player. It's not one with the levels of whimsy that would actually float very well in my campaign. My players generally don't like that kind of whimsy. I'm not speaking for all, I'm just speaking for my group. They don't mind humor. In fact, they enjoy humor in D&D, but they don't seem to really take this kind of stuff. I found that out the hard way. In my Feywild campaign, it wasn't met with rounding success. So sometimes you just have a dud and you just kind of move on afterward and don't let it bother you. Feywild would have been one of mine, which is a shame because I think Feywild is a fantastic idea and a fantastic place to game, but it just didn't resonate with my group. Well, that's all I've got today. Tomorrow, I'm going to post up the EX2 module, Land Beyond the Magic Mirror. This was a sequel to this first one and follows the later book by Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures Through the Looking Glass. I'm going to go into some detail on this one as well. And, well, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Well, that closes the book on another episode of page 121. Please leave your comments below, and if you enjoyed what you saw, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.